What's up, Archons? I'm Flightless Pheasant, and now that you're here, we can put the top card of our deck into play face down and start talking about some tokens coming in the near future. But before we do, I'm a huge fan of Keyforge. And if you are too, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell, as I'll be bringing you even more lore from Keyforge and the Crucible. Today I'm going to be doing a special installment in my series, Completing the Cycle. Cycles in Keyforge are a group of cards that are connected by a central theme that usually appear in the same set together. Frequently there's one per house, sometimes just one for each house in a single house, and on rare occasions, multiples in the same house. And this is going to be one such occasion, as we're going to be talking about the token creatures that came out in Winds of Exchange. Or more specifically, we're going to be talking about the potential future token creatures that could be coming out in Tokens of Change. So, with that in mind, I do want to go over the tokens that we got originally so that we can compare them to the ones that I've put together. And I didn't actually make a token for House Redemption because they are going to be getting one in the set that we've already previewed, and I only really felt like I could make one token per house, and that trying to do all four would have been too much of an effort. But I do want to go through the existing tokens for a baseline comparison so that we have a point of reference for the ones that I've designed. Are you ready? Let's do it. Okay, each house got 4 tokens, so we're going to put all 4 of them up and go through them really quick. You'll notice that the tokens tend to be really small power and have basically one gimmick each. In each house, there was also a token that was linked with a specific other card, but for time purposes, we're just going to not worry about the links and just look at the tokens themselves. So we're going to start with House Brobnar. Brobnar had the Berserker, Grumpus, Skirmisher, and Warrior tokens. Generally speaking, token creatures were 1 power, but the Brobnar tokens kind of bucked this trend and tended to be a little stronger. The Berserker is a 5 power giant token that enters play ready and in rage, and after you fight with it, you have to destroy it. Berserker was one of the largest tokens, but after fight it dies, so it's usually only going to get 1 use. Grumpus is a 2 power token with Splash 1, meaning that it can spread out quite a bit of damage and might survive a fight, particularly if it's with another token. Skirmisher is a 2 power goblin with Skirmish that's pretty good at fighting, but not much else, and a little stronger than the average token at 2 instead of 1 power. And then the Warrior is a 4 power token that cannot reap unless there are no enemy creatures in play, meaning most of the time it's going to fight, but sometimes it might be able to get in a pivotal reap. The Quadernillos tokens are a little more traditional in terms of power, each being 1 power, and they are the Diplomat, Prospector, Strange Shell, and Trader tokens. The Diplomat is a 1 power Gatruka politician with Elusive that says after reap, each player gains 1. Very two-sided, as you would expect from a Quadern. The Prospector is a 1 power human that has destroyed, draw a card, and is broadly considered one of the most powerful tokens to come out of Winds of Exchange. The Strange Shell is a 1 power 4 armor beast that cannot fight or reap, but as an action you can put it back into your hand, which gave a lot of utility for keeping the cards you wanted to keep not being tokens in your hand. And the Trader is a 1 power Gatruka merchant that has action Steal 1, Destroy Trader, which was a pretty good effect, but felt a little weak that he had to die for it. The House Mars tokens were Blorb, Grunt, Rebel, and Researcher. Again, you'll see mostly 1 power creatures. The Blorb is a 1 power beast with Elusive, and Blorb cannot reap. When it's destroyed, return Blorb Hive from your discard pile to your hand, which was the linked card for that token. Grunt is just a 3 power Martian soldier, vanilla straight up. Rebel is a 1 power Martian Ironics creature that says after reap, deal 1 damage to a creature. And Researcher was a 1 power Martian scientist with Omni, reveal a Mars card from your hand and archive it. Good effects all around, and again you see this relatively low power level. Plus the Grunt gives us a general idea of what a token with no abilities should look like in terms of its power. Sanctum gives us the Cleric, Defender, Disciple, and Squire tokens, with a good spread between 1 and 2 power on this one. So the Cleric is a 1 power human that says after Cleric enters play, capture 1 amber. The Defender is a 2 power 1 armor creature with no other abilities. Again, an idea of a vanilla creature. The Disciple is a 1 power human monk that says it gets +1 power and +1 armor for each monk neighbor it has, so it gets up to being 3 power and 2 armor if it has 2 Disciple neighbors. And then the Squire token is a 2 power creature with Taunt. So again, we get to see some of the spread of the more vanilla type creatures when we look at House Sanctum. House Saurian, much like House Brobnar, is known for its large creatures, and its tokens are also on the large side. You have Beltaren Warrior, Soldier, Senator, and Trooper. Beltaren Warrior is 5 power with 2 armor and no other abilities, but it did come with a card that gave the deck a drawback, so that ended up being fair. The Scholar is a 1 power Dinosaur Philosopher with After Reap draw a card, also a really good effect, considered almost as good as the Prospector, if not better. The Senator is a 2 power Dinosaur Politician with action, keys cost +1 during your opponent's next turn. And the Trooper is a 5 power Dinosaur Soldier with After Fight, After Reap, Exalt Trooper. So it was good power, but your opponent was probably going to get that Amber back after a short amount of time. House Star Alliance had the Amberling, Bot, Cadet, and Explorer tokens. The Amberling was a 1 power Silicate that cannot reap, but you can spend it as if it were Amber in your pool during your Forge a Key step or whenever you would normally forge a key. Which was very useful, and that one was also linked with another card. Bot is a 1 power robot with action, use a friendly non-Star Alliance creature, very thematic for Star Alliance. Cadet was a 1 power human with destroyed Ready Cadet's most powerful neighbor, which was to help prevent it from readying itself in its own battle line. And Explorer was a 2 power alien with After Reap, look at the top card of your deck, you may discard it, another classic Star Alliance ability. And the last set of tokens we need to look at from the Winds of Exchange set are the Unfathomable tokens. These are the Cultist, Fish, Priest, and Raider. The Cultist is a 2 power Aquan Cultist that has action Destroy Cultist if you do ward a friendly creature. The Fish is a 2 power Beast that has Destroyed, deal 2 damage to the most powerful enemy creature. The Priest is a 2 power Aquan with action, exhaust an enemy creature. And the Raider is a 1 power Aquan that gains poison during your turn. Okay, so that's all of the tokens from Winds of Exchange. But before we jump into my predictions for Tokens of Change, I do want to go over the one token we have seen for Tokens of Change, and that's for the House of Redemption. This new token is called a Guardian token, and it's 1 power 2 armor human knight. It's basically the inverse of Sanctum's Defender token, which was 2 power 1 armor, and I think that this duality between the Redemption tokens and the Sanctum tokens is hopefully going to be a theme that I am looking forward to in the set. But now that we've gotten that out of the way, we've seen all of the tokens we know so far, and we can dive into my predictions of what tokens might look like for the 6 remaining houses that have not yet gotten tokens. So just like I've done in the past, I commissioned some artwork for these cards, and I commissioned it from Ketzer as I've done before. I'll put a link down in the description for Ketzer's artwork. They do an amazing job, and I'm happy to work with them again, so hopefully you guys really like these tokens that we put together. So I'm going to start in the alphabetical order of the houses, which means we're going to be starting with House Dis. So the token I came up with for House Dis is called a Fiend token. It's 1 power with no armor, Imp, and it says, action, your opponent loses 1 amber. Amber loss is a very common effect among Dis creatures, and I thought that this was going to be a really good way to represent that. My early versions of this card gave it elusive, but ultimately I decided that probably wasn't necessary, because much like Winds of Exchange, I expect Tokens of Change will have the ability to produce multiple tokens in a single turn without too much difficulty, and so even if your opponent can kill 1 or 2 of these, just having a couple of them will be devastating to keeping an amber pool for any extended period of time. Next up is the Geistoid token, and for this one I went with a Spook. This is a 2 power Spectre robot that has, while this creature has amber on it, it gains Elusive and Skirmish. Geistoid has shown us a number of effects that trigger for creatures that have amber on them, and I thought incorporating this into their token could be really nice. Some of the early versions of this token allowed it to gain amber either by capturing or exalting itself, but I ultimately decided that that was probably not necessary, as Geistoid should have enough ways to put amber on creatures all on its own, and so I figured I would just let this token benefit from having amber on it without any built-in way of getting that amber. And in so doing, I thought it was fair to increase its power from the traditional 1 to 2. Alright, next up is the Logos token I came up with, and I was really excited to do this one. This is also the first token that I did that's going to have flavor text, and there are a couple that do because I'm me and I just love flavor text. So this is the Experiment token. It's a 2 power ooze that has action, flip this creature. I really felt like the flip mechanic was wildly underutilized in Winds of Exchange, and it felt like Logos should be the house that really dives deep into that, as they were sort of the house that played around with the tide in the most interesting ways during Dark Tidings, and I thought that the flip mechanic seemed very similar in the way that Logos might just experiment with it. Also, it does have flavor text. You'll see experiment number 260, fail. Experiment number 261, fail. Experiment number 262, fail. I just really like the idea that Logos will just keep experimenting and experimenting and experimenting, ignoring failures until eventually they get what they want. And I think this token also is about getting what you want. Either keeping the creature underneath the token, keeping the token itself, or flipping it over as a non-creature so that it goes to your discard to be cycled into your deck later. Next up is my Shadows token, and with Shadows and Skyborn, I kind of wanted to experiment with two different types of steel, as those do seem to be the two houses that are going to use the steel mechanic the most. So I wanted to see if I could come up with two different ways of doing it that felt interesting. For the Shadows one, I came up with the Burglar token. It's a 1-power elf thief that says after Burglar enters play, if your opponent has 7 or more amber, steal 1. This was sort of a riff on the Sanctum Cleric token, but I really thought that if I made it any more powerful than being able to put your opponent down to where they're checking at 6, it would probably be too good. Also, because it is in-house Shadows, there's probably other ways that you can steal amber besides this to pull your opponent off of check, so I wanted to make sure that this was still a fair and balanced token, even if it did have a steal mechanic in it. And then there's the Skyborn token, and like I said, I also wanted to experiment with steel mechanics here, but I wanted to do something a little different. So, the Skyborn token I came up with is the Pirate token. It's a 3-power Stormkin creature that says if this creature is undamaged, it cannot reap. After fight, steal 1 amber. So I wanted something that had the sort of Skyborn fight to steal effect, but I didn't want something that was too powerful. I wanted something that was not better than a grunt, but was still its own creature and could get value. But I also figured if it was less than 3 power and didn't have skirmish or some other offensive ability, it probably wouldn't survive a fight very often. So I needed it to be at least 3 power. I experimented with having it at a higher power, but I reminded myself that this is going to be in a set with lots of tokens, and that most of the tokens are going to be 1 or 2 power, so as long as it's fighting into an enemy token, it will survive most of the time. And by preventing it from being able to reap until it's damaged, I encourage you to actually use that fight. This is another card that I gave flavor text to, and this time I went with Pirates in the Sky. Sky Pirates. And then the last token was for House Untamed. I really wanted something that brought out the essence of Untamed, and so I went with the Kitten token. It's a 1-power cat with skirmish that says after fight, this creature give this creature 2+1 power counters. I really wanted something that kind of felt like a flumph, but could only really buff itself, and so I started small, but I like the idea that this creature can really snowball. And if you let your opponent have a board of these tokens, they'll quickly get out of hand and be very difficult to deal with. I also really like the flavor text for this one. It says, "They grow up so fast," and it's attributed to the Expedition to the Carnivorous Forest's final log entry. And that's it. Those are the tokens I came up with for Tokens of Change. If you like them a lot, please let me know down in the comments. If you have your own tokens that you think would be really cool for these houses, I'd love to hear it. As always, big shout out to Ketzer for helping me get the art together. Always a pleasure to work with them. And I've got their link down in the description. And yeah, this was a really fun thought experiment. I'm hoping to do more of these because you guys really seem to like the completing the cycle stuff. If you think my tokens are great, let me know. But that's all I have for you today. So until next time, later, Archons.